Their story is a story of perseverance and sacrifice. Their story is a story of bringing people around the world together because of their bravery. Their story is a story that should never be forgotten. I met Staff Sergeant Frank Wada in 2017 at the Hollywood screening of Stacey Hayashi's Go for Broke film, a poignant movie that brought history to life for me. Before the screening, we coincidentally sat down next to each other. Little did I know how that one conversation would change my life. He started telling me his story about how his family was incarcerated in Poston, Arizona, how he and his brother Ted joined the 442nd, how they fought in Italy and France, how he got wounded in action. He even sent me a binder filled with his photographs, letters, and other special pieces of his history, which detailed his experiences related to World War II. 3 years later, we were gearing up to celebrate Mr. Wada's birthday, where I was organizing a birthday card drive for him when he tragically passed away just a month before he turned 100. Heartbroken, I visited his gravesite at the Miramar National Cemetery to pay my respects. I reflected on the stories he told me, and as I flipped through the binder he gifted me, I felt so lucky to have formed this intergenerational friendship with Mr. Wada. Because of this connection, I wanted to see where he and all the other Nisei soldiers fought, with my own eyes. That summer, my family planned a trip to France and Germany to visit where the 442nd fought. After a heart-wrenching visit to Dachau concentration camp, where the Japanese-American 522nd Field Artillery Battalion located satellite camps and released Jewish prisoners, we traveled to Bruyères, where we met Mr. Martial Hilaire and his daughter Marjolaine from the Peace and Freedom Association. We were able to connect with them because I saw in Mr. Wada's binder that they had formed a friendship years ago. Thanks to their kindness and dedication to honor the JA soldiers who liberated their town, we were able to take a walk back in time. In the forest of Bruyères, I sat in the foxholes that Nisei soldiers once took cover in. This is a foxhole right here, used by the 442. It was on this hill that Mr. Frank Wada was injured. He told me how the enemy purposely fired up into the trees so that shrapnel would rain down on the American troops. He said there was no way to escape when all of the trees above you were exploding into a million pieces. The day we were there, it was raining. I looked up and tried to imagine all of those raindrops being sharp, piercing shards of shrapnel and trees. There really was nowhere to go. After 4 days of fierce fighting, they secured the hills around Bruyères and pushed the Germans out of town. As the Nisei soldiers marched into Bruyères, the citizens, who had been hiding in their basements for 2 months, finally came out and celebrated. Bruyères eventually named this street the Avenue of the 442nd Infantry Regiment, in honor of the soldiers who liberated them. The most touching part of this trip was seeing the appreciation that the town of Bruyères had for the 442nd and 100th. Every year, they celebrate the liberation by reenacting it and inviting JA veterans to come back. Even in LA, where I'm from, we don't have a yearly citywide celebration of the JA soldiers. Everywhere we went, there were memorials and monuments recognizing the bravery of the Nisei soldiers. Starting at City Hall, where we met Mr. Hilaire and Marjolaine, display cases spread across the first and second floors with art, memorabilia, and artifacts related to the 442nd. I was amazed by the sheer amount of recognition and respect that they had for the Japanese-American soldiers even to this day. Up in the forest where the Battle of Bruyères was fought, this monument, carved with the Go for Broke torch, says, "The city of Bruyères will forever be grateful to these soldiers. Cherish their memory and their fight for freedom." We placed origami cranes to honor this message and pay our respects. This sculpture, called the Knot of Friendship, was gifted by Americans for the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Bruyères and symbolizes the international connection between the Japanese-American community and this town on the other side of the world. The plaque of this monument reads, "To the men of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team U.S. Army, who reaffirmed a historic truth here, that loyalty to one's country is not modified by racial origin." We then traveled 6 hilly miles east to Bifontaine, where the Battle of the Lost Battalion was fought. Through the thick trees and uphill climb, the 442nd risked their lives to do the impossible, to save the surrounded Texas National Guard 1st Battalion. Up there is where the German position was, so they had to get through them, and the Texans were positioned further up, so they fought through the Germans to rescue them. Though they succeeded in saving 211 soldiers, they suffered over 800 casualties. Mr. Frank Wada's brother, Ted, was only one of 8 of the K Company to come out walking. But the 442nd and 100th had saved their fellow Americans and taken the Vosges Mountains, a key victory against Nazi Germany. This monument, at the top of the hill where the Lost Battalion dug in, recognizes the heroism of the Texas Division and the 442nd. All of these landmarks commemorating JA history, Mr. Hilaire and Marjolaine, and the Peace and Freedom Association show us how the 442nd and 100th are remembered and celebrated for future generations as well. Just this past spring break, I visited the National World War II Museum in New Orleans and saw Shane Sato's Go for Broke exhibition. I was pleasantly surprised to see how crowded his exhibit was. People were taking their time and reading the stories of each JA veteran. Even though the rest of the museum had very anti-Japanese Imperial Army messages, I could tell that people now know how to differentiate between the Japanese Empire and loyal Japanese American people. The JA Go for Broke spirit helped people become more collectively tolerant, and it gives me hope that we as a country won't let communities struggle in silence like Japanese Americans did during World War II. To this day, the legacy of the Japanese American soldiers continues to bring diverse perspectives to others and teaches people how to be courageous and patriotic in the face of hatred and racism. I believe Mr. Wada passed on his stories to me so that I can continue preserving and sharing the history of the Nisei soldiers. Their fight against the enemy and against identity-based discrimination will never be forgotten. They liberated concentration camps in Germany while their families were still in incarceration camps in the US. They not only fought for our country, but they fought against the hatred our country showed them. They turned that hate into hope. Hope that is felt by people all around the world, like in Bruyere. Because of Mr. Frank Wada and all of the Japanese American soldiers and their Go for Broke spirit, I have hope for a more tolerant and equitable world. I carry this hope with me every day, and by sharing their stories, I am committed to passing on this hope generations into the future. Mr. Wada has shaped my writing for Pacific Ties, UCLA's Asian American news magazine, to highlight the uniqueness of our Japanese American history as well as the intersections of and the fight against discrimination across minority communities. I miss Mr. Wada, and even though I'll never get another typewritten letter from him in the mail, I will always remember our friendship and dedicate myself to preserving his legacy and that of our brave Japanese American soldiers.